Organization Day offers a glimpse of the upcoming session. IU continues to confront freedom of speech issues and a test of Indiana's self-defense laws in Whitestown. From the television studios at WFYI Public Media, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending November 21st, 2025.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
Indiana senators voted to return for the 2026 legislative session in January, bucking calls from Governor Mike Braun to meet next month to redraw congressional maps to favor Republicans. As Ben Thorpe reports, the decision comes as lawmakers return for Organization Day, the ceremonial start of the new legislative session.
The Trump administration has been ramping up pressure on Indiana's Republican lawmakers and has criticized Governor Mike Braun. Senate President Pro Tem Roderick Bray says while he wants Republicans to keep control of Congress, he doesn't feel redistricting is the right way to do it.
Trying to do the best thing for the state of Indiana and as well as for the United States of America.
Republican Senator Mike Young favors redistricting. He said he'll cry if the Democrats are able to take back the U.S. House.
I don't want to cry on Wednesday morning following that election, knowing that we could have done something and we didn't.
In a statement, Braun said he will support primary challenges against senators who refuse to redraw maps.
So has this issue laid bare a divide amongst Indiana Republicans? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Ann DeLaney. Republican Mike O'Brien. John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers. And Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief at Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Jill Sheridan, managing editor at WFYI. So, Mike, should current Republican lawmakers be worried, as the governor said, about their districts being primaried now?
Some of them, sure, but there's rhetoric around this that is like intense, and then there's like, what's the actual math look like? And so half the Senate's up every 2 years, so there's 25 members up. If you take away the Democrats, 2 open seats for Republican retirements, where this issue may be raised, but it's not a motivator to have a competitive primary, right? Because the incumbents are retiring. Take away the undecideds, take away the 13 that are openly supporting this, that are of those 25 running for re-election, you're left with like 4 people. That's Greg Good, Greg Good's one of the undecideds. Rick Niemeyer up in Northwest Indiana is one of the undecideds, and Dan Darnell is undecided. Dan Darnell's former Lake County chairman, all they're saying is just show us the map. we haven't seen anything, right? We'll come off undecided once we see what we're talking about here, particularly Darnell, because he's run congressional races up there. He knows what he's talking about in Lake County and what that all looks like. But of the 4 that are left, 2 of them, Senator Deary and Senator Buck, already have primaries. Buck had a primary because he told everybody locally he was going to retire, and so people started running. And that was well before redistricting. Deary does have a primary that's motivated by redistricting. That's Micah Beckwith, part of his team, who's made this the issue. The other 2 that are left are Kyle Walker from Indianapolis, who former Marion County chairman, one of the most capable political guys in the party, much less in the Senate, and Travis Holdman, the Senate tax chair. So if you want to go to the Markle Pancake House and go start bad-mouthing Travis Holdman, like, see how far you get, but like you look at that and you go, what's the real exposure here? So they're saying we're going to primary everybody. Well, are they going to, a lot of those 13 supporters have primaries. Andy Zay just got one today up in, or this week up in Northeast Indiana. So, yes, there's a lot of smoke around primaries right now. Are they motivated by redistricting? 1 or 2 are, but the idea you're going to go flip the whole Senate on redistricting is not accurate. And if you take it a level further and go, okay, well, what about a leadership challenge? Because that's been suggested by the president and the governor. Of the 19 who voted to come back in January instead of come back in December, who voted to come back in December, who are presumptively for redistricting reform, 8 of those are committee chairs appointed by Bray. And so they're in leadership. His deputy is, Senator Garton is one of those people in favor of redistricting. So you start looking at the math and you go, I don't know if there's anything here. Like around the edges, sure. It kind of reminds me of like the Liberty Caucus a couple years ago, did 24 primaries against incumbent House Republicans. They primaried them all from the right, and 22 of them lost. So I think that's kind of like the dynamic that we're looking at here, just because the math doesn't support it.
Well, we saw some math at the State House, during Organization Day, and a lot of drama as well. The whole country looking at Indiana really, and this week as lawmakers, rejoin for Organization Day and looking at the things that people are saying. Indiana's having a moment right now.
They are, and they're rising to it. I said last week that I thought there were enough principled Republicans to stop the attempt to steal the election. I think the idea that it's going to steal the election or that's going to make Donald Trump win if he has 2 more votes here ignores history. In 2018, he lost 47 House seats. Usually the number is 20. He doubled the buyer's remorse in 2018. He's going to triple it this year. So the idea that, the 2 in Indiana were going to make a difference is completely illusory. But I am glad that there were principled people who say that, we have to have a system, we have to operate under a series of rules, and we have to follow those rules. And we have to limit government in that way by following the rules that are there. You don't change them in midstream because some narcissist in Washington wants complete power. You don't do that. Any more than you're in the NCAA double finals and all of a sudden you say, you refs are all going to be fired unless I have 7 fouls instead of 5. You just don't do that. And they rose to the occasion. They say that people have to have faith in the system. And faith in the system means that you govern according to the rules that everybody recognizes. And the idea that you would completely disenfranchise all Democrats from any representation in Congress is ridiculous. But that's the kind of mantra that people like Beckwith and Braun are perpetrating. And I think Mike's right. I don't think they're going to make anything other than maybe around the edges, maybe not even around the edges. When you look at the kind of weak, anemic demonstration in favor of redistricting that they were able to generate, I think we're going to be fine. And I think Indiana stood up. And that's exactly what these state legislatures should be doing.
And now we've heard, Niki, some rhetoric about let's just focus on, District 1 then and really make that a primary concern. Is that going to still be in play?
That's a fair discussion to have. Are you going to spend more on a bunch of Senate Republican primaries in a flyover state? Or could you just put that money into CD1? Frank Mrvan only won with 54% of the vote last time. So that one is certainly within striking distance and would, be done without the qualms that some Senate Republicans are having about changing these maps in midstream with no new census. So, that's an idea, is just pool your money on one thing instead of, trying to oust a bunch of Senate Republicans who agree with you on 99 other things.
Well, John,
maybe not going forward, though.
Obviously, Organization Day was, an event this year, and people are paying attention. Yeah. And people, everyday people are paying attention, to the issue right now that may not, have been as engaged as the session began last year. Is that what you're reading as well?
It is fun to see Indiana in the hub of everything. It's nice to be the epicenter. I think it is when I'm not being paid to lobby one side or the other. I like when people get engaged and pay attention. Yeah. Now, how about that? We'll start there. I think, if anything, the national focus solidifies the opposition to redistricting. This is not, I think the people who oppose this in the Senate, it's not a political calculation to them. It is a moral and a principle-based calculation. And that, if anything, probably now they're emboldened. Because a lot of this, conjecture that's gone on thus far suggests that the sort of phenomenon of Trump defies all laws of nature and gravity and is static and will be forever. I think we've already seen the high water mark, and I'm not the only person that would suggest that, when archaeologists come and see how the Trump flood, how high it went and then receded, I think it's receding now. We're seeing people in Congress, Republicans for the first time, saying, no, we're not going to do what you want. We could sit here and cite a lot of other issues that are getting a lot of attention, but this is about Indiana. And I think we're seeing the same here. I think people are looking at the long game in history and saying, we have a lame duck president. We have somebody who's stepped in it quite a bit lately. do I really want to have my kids and grandkids looking at a vote that I sided with what ultimately could be seen as a sad chapter in American history and in Indiana history? I think the capital is spent. I think Mike Braun probably is not going to win this and has probably damaged himself in some ways in the process. So I don't see this passing. I haven't thought it was going to pass from day one, and I don't see anything to change that.
Well, obviously, there are people out there, though, Mike, that are still, on the side of let's redistrict, let's do what, President Trump wants us to do. And we're seeing the effects of that, I think, as of taping today, 6 or 7. Sorry, 6, 7. People have been swatted, which is, when law enforcement is called to homes. But there's been a resounding, understanding that that's probably not the way to resolve this issue.
No, it's going to go the other direction. Yeah, I mean, those cases are extraordinary and should never happen. But I mean, the pro-redistricting forces have gained ground as this has gone on, but it's also gone on for 3 months. Yeah. And now we're within striking distance of the filing period opening. And what you're really asking here is we're not redrawing 2 Democrat districts to make them Republican. We're redrawing 9. And so 9 incumbents are going to have all or parts. And I know you laugh when you say, oh, yeah, they're going to have to go campaign, which is true. But also, they're changing the rules on them like right when they start. And they've represented these places for 2, 4, 6 years. And now they're going to have a new district, new counties, and they're going to have no time, plus a primary challenge. And it's like, what could go wrong with that plan? And so when Senator Bray comes along and says, why don't we just take all this money and effort and put it into the 1st district, that makes a whole lot of sense.
A lot more sense.
Well, I don't think they're going to follow that, though. I think those diehards, right-wingers in your party are going to push all the way up to the session starting in January, and maybe even after that.
Well, keep in mind, we've talked about the executive branch in terms of the governor and what the president wants. We've talked about the legislative branch in terms of what the legislature may or may not do. We can't leave the judiciary out of this. Look at what happened in Texas, where you had a district court and now a court of appeals that said those maps that were drawn, much ballyhooed maps that were drawn at the urging of the Trump administration, probably ran afoul of the law, the Constitution, because, as it's been interpreted by the Supreme Court, because it's racial in nature. And the Supreme Court has carved out that one. They don't want to get into it. Yeah, politics, gerrymandering's fine, but it can't be of a racial nature. And I would guarantee that if you see the districts in the region and in Marion County, the same issue would appear. Right. And unless the Supreme Court acts very quickly, and they've shown a willingness to do that, this will just be protracted in court for the same reasons it was in Texas.
The irony is, quickly, I know we're running over right here, but the California approach to redistricting, because they went through a ballot referendum, it's legally insulated. Yeah. So we could walk out of this redistricting effort with Indiana in court, Texas in court, and net 8 Democrats.
Democratic votes. The New York Times this week did an analysis. It's a net gain for Democrats.
Well, certainly an interesting issue that has brought a lot of eyes to the State House ahead of the session. Now it is time in the show for our viewer feedback. Each week we pose an unscientific online poll question. And this week's question, will this rift among Indiana Senate Republicans last? Yes or no? Last week's question, should out-of-state groups influence Indiana Republicans, as we were still talking about redistricting? 2% yes, 98% voting no. If you would like to take part in the poll, go to wfyi.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Indiana University President Pamela Whitten is asking the faculty government to recommend whether the university adopt a set of guidelines for free expression on campus. Ethan Sandwise reports.
In a letter, Whitten asked the council to evaluate adopting the Chicago Principles, a statement on the value of free expression signed by many other universities. The UFC, a faculty government of sorts elected by professors, is no longer able to pass policy since changes introduced this year at the State House and ratified by the IU Board of Trustees. The body now operates in a purely advisory capacity. Whitten sent her request amidst a series of high-profile cases that have led some to question the university's commitment to free speech. Most recently, an IU professor was suspended from teaching after a student complained about a graphic she used describing Make America Great Again as a form of white supremacy. The university also recently backtracked on a decision to end print editions of the Indiana Daily Student after it directed the student newspaper to exclude news from physical copies.
So, Ann, is this response from IU leadership really going to make a difference?
Based on her performance, absolutely not. I mean, she has been a disgrace in terms of First Amendment and free expression. Our flagship universities are supposed to be places to develop critical thinking and exchange all kinds of ideas and come up with your own philosophy, and she has shut that down at every turn. She's had students arrested. She's taken Dunn Meadow away from them for demonstrations. She's had a faculty member suspended because some student didn't like something that she had prepared and went to Jim Banks. They didn't have the procedures followed. They didn't do due process for her or anything else. Now she's going to the faculty who she and the legislature have stripped of any power. I mean, through our history, it's always been the university administration and the faculty that run these higher institutions. She's taken that power away from them and embarrassed us in Indiana and those who went to IU with her performance on free speech. And now she wants, what, a fig leaf? I mean, I don't have any particular problem with the Chicago free speech items, but the idea that after she's done what she's done, since she's been in office, now she comes back and says, we're going to protect free expression. I think if she goes to this faculty for advice, the advice ought to be to resign.
Is this just a Band-Aid then on all these, issues popping up at IU around freedom of expression, around freedom of speech, and also the law that Ann mentioned? I mean, it does, play a significant factor in what a council can or cannot do at IU.
I think we're at the end of it, but I think the reason they're looking at a more comprehensive policy, and the Chicago model has been used by a lot of universities. But I think it's because we have had these series of missteps that have required Band-Aids that have gone completely unresolved, or largely unresolved, or they're just triaging every situation where they're trying to suppress speech or break up protests, or the other things that when I wasn't some liberal when I went to IU either. And I've said this before. I went to IU. I was a poli-sci major. I never expected I was getting a fair shake at Constitution class or in Congress class or all these classes I had to go to.
Did you write for senator?
I love I kind of liked it for
Yeah,
the same sick reason I like sitting here.
Yeah, the give and take. That's exactly right.
And at some point, I'm tired of letting the kids off the hook. Show up and punch back if you don't like it or you think it's biased.
That's exactly
and don't expect the administration to come in and suspend the professor and do all this snowflake stuff that we that we don't need. Go in and get educated and make your case and stop whining.
The Band-Aid they're looking for and the series of mistakes are all hers. Hers and the board appointed by Braun, and they have sanctioned all of those things. I mean, changing the rules on Dunn Meadow, at midnight the night before in a secret meeting, and then now she's going to be protecting free speech. I have about as much confidence in that as I do in Todd Rokita as Attorney General.
I think your IU season tickets are back at the bottom.
I think they probably are, but that's okay. There are some things, as Senator Bray will tell you, that are worth fighting for.
Well, John, I mean, what do you think? We have, professors that are, do they need to be worried about what they're saying from day to day?
Yes.
I mean, they are now, but let's hope not. I mean, thank goodness the football team has been winning this year. We were a lot of fans among the IU nation or IU brethren. The president should be the most enthusiastic supporter because it has masked a lot of the otherwise embarrassing faux pas that have taken place. A lot of ham-fisted handling of a lot of First Amendment issues that are all self-inflicted wounds. Let's get this on the record. The Chicago principles, great. Love them, endorse them, wonderful. 100-plus universities have it. But just enacting them, that's only part of the battle. The university administration has to live up to it because you have it's a group called FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They rank the schools based on how bad they are in terms of expression. Well, we rank third from the bottom. We were the worst public institution. And you know who was below us? Barnard and Columbia. Columbia accepted the Chicago principles in 2016. Didn't do a lot to boost them in the rankings. So it only comes as a matter of how we adhere to it. Great in principle, great in theory. Let's hope. She could have done this on her own. It strikes me as sort of the Trump administration waiting for a bill to be passed before records are released. Now that you have sort of an emasculated faculty anyway, why bother? If you really want to stand up for expression, just do it.
If you want to stand up for expression, then do it.
Well, what steps could the school take, at this point, Niki? I mean, yes, this is a bit performatory, but, what are students and what should the school do?
I mean, they can adopt them, but again, like John said, how you implement them are key. And someone said, should professors be worried? And I think the answer is yes. From my understanding of this person that they've suspended, it was based on one graphic. Like, there was nothing about whether, is her overarching, teaching is rude to conservatives? Does she let them also speak in class? I mean, none of that was addressed. It was just, if you can get fired or suspended for one graphic you put out, that's serious.
And they took her off the class, but it was a social work class. I mean, these were also graduate students who, are probably at a greater understanding and level of this work. And so I know that's part of the argument.
This is about protecting students' fragile feelings and upsetting them. How about the preachers that in my day and continue now stand out there near Ballantyne Hall and Woodburn, your old stomping grounds, and call people whores, fornicators, sluts, and worse? I don't see the university trying to stamp that out, nor should they.
No.
But that's just to attacking women. That's okay.
Well,
we know that.
attack.
Well, I mean, I think, we're going to continue to, see issues like this arise at universities as well.
Well, if she continues her performance, we are. If she's learned something from this based on her reversal on the student newspaper, maybe she's learned something. I don't know. But she needs to learn.
She's been good for the football program, though.
The
NIL money's been good.
That's not the most important.
I know. A national championship is good salve on a lot of wounds.
The Boone County prosecutor charged a Whitestown homeowner with voluntary manslaughter this week after he shot and killed a woman who mistakenly came to his door earlier this month. Zach Castle reports the office's decision, which may turn into a larger test case for Indiana's Stand Your Ground law.
Kurt Anderson is charged with a felony count of voluntary manslaughter for allegedly shooting María Florinda Ríos Pérez de Velásquez through his front door on November 5th. Ríos Pérez was a member of a cleaning crew that mistakenly went to his address. Anderson told police he thought people were trying to break in and fired one shot. The shooting drew attention to Indiana's Stand Your Ground law, which allows a person to use reasonable force in self-defense. Kent Eastwood is the Boone County prosecutor.
It is vitally important for the citizens of Boone County to understand that our decision today in no way should be interpreted as a challenge to Indiana Stand Your Ground law.
Ríos Pérez was a mother of 4. Last week, her family hosted a vigil in front of the prosecutor's office.
So, John, with this case as well grabbing national attention, could this become a test of Indiana's self-defense laws?
Well, I think it has certainly focused a lot of attention on it and brought it to the awareness of a lot of people who maybe have not really known what the law is here. I don't think it's intended to be a challenge. Certainly the prosecutor who filed these charges doesn't want it to be a challenge. You look at the way the statute is written, you have to have reasonable. Somebody has to be a reasonable judgment. That doesn't mean that a paranoiac somehow has more constitutional rights than somebody who isn't paranoid. I mean, according to the police report, he and his family first went to their safe room in the house before they got the guns, and that might suggest their mindset that they're already predisposed to think that evil is about to befall them. Maybe not as reasonable as those of us who don't have safe rooms in our houses. And then also the proportionality of it. The old notion you can't, bring, even with the law as it's written here, I think you still can't, if somebody pricks you with a fountain pen, I can't blow Ann away. I mean, no, I wouldn't do that to you. But I mean, you can't bring a Glock to a fist fight to a certain extent. And I don't know, she had a mop and a broom perhaps. So I think a firearm probably is a little disproportionate.
Mike, I've seen, Indiana's law differs from other, states that have similar laws, but I have heard that, Indiana's law is a little, less stringent than other states. Are we going to, as far as other cases that we've seen, with this issue, is this going to be different in this state?
I don't think the prosecutor would have brought the charge if he thought that he had reasonably fit, this act had reasonably fit within the parameters or the boundaries of what that law allows, which is if you believe you're about to be harmed or killed, then you have the right to.
It's more than just
stand your ground,
reasonably
right?
believe.
And the prosecutor clearly, by bringing the charge, doesn't believe that standard was met. And so I don't think it's intended to be like a universal challenge to it or reconsideration of it. It's just did you meet the standard of the law? And the prosecutor believes no, he didn't.
It's a pretty similar case to one that's been getting a lot of attention on Netflix for a documentary called The Perfect Neighbor. In that case, the Florida woman knew who was knocking on her door, had already called police and told them to come, and then shot through the closed door, and she was found guilty. She also tried to stand her ground. So it's pretty similar. He didn't know who was knocking, but there were keys. I don't know of a lot of burglars who use keys to try to get in. He didn't call the police before he shot, although apparently there was a safe room. That was new to me. So, I think it'll definitely,
the police
it'll probably end up going to a jury, I would assume.
And maybe they'll make a Netflix show.
I think we ought to give kudos to the Boone County prosecutor for having that.
That's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel has been Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief at the Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review podcast and episodes at wfyi.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Jill Sheridan, managing editor at WFYI. Join us next time because a lot can happen in an Indiana week. The views expressed are solely those of the panelists.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.